They've all issued guidelines for remote hearings, but I perceive a challenge coming from ADR clauses in our respective parties' agreement. Now, our duty as lawyers is to choose to either be a solution provider or a problem identifier. I urge those of us who are going to be contending with these issues to seek to provide solutions to parties, because parties who are in dispute, who are before then, who were in a mutually beneficial relationship, only want to get back to their relationship. So your duty, our duty as lawyers, is to help them get back to their relationship. So how do we move from where we are, where ADR clauses fail to provide for ODR, that's online dispute resolution? And
okay, and just to notify you, Emeka, you're at the 12-minute mark, so maybe you should begin wrapping up. Thank you.
Then there are privacy issues versus data protection when you're dealing with ODR. Number 3 is CPD. Now, you can no longer hold fiscal law conferences, at least for the current period. International law conferences are going virtual. Meetings, webinars, trainings, how strong is the IT infrastructure in Africa? We need to begin to close these identified gaps. Random thoughts. What is our thoughts on criminal justice administration? I'd like to hear more when we go into the questions and answers or interactive session. Employment within the legal profession. How do we fit it with the work from home policy? Can most law firms in Africa apply work from home policy? What about commercial law? How do we help business grow? Bearing in mind that with the recently signed ACTA, how does ODR and online or virtual practice support ACTA? Networking strategies. Before now, we used to network through conferences. Now lawyers are networking more through social media platforms such as LinkedIn. What is the necessary strategies for networking? In conclusion, the Pan-African Lawyers Union is a membership forum for African continental lawyers and lawyers associations. PALU was founded in 2002 by African bar leaders and eminent lawyers to reflect the aspirations and concerns of the African people and to promote and defend our shared interests. Our mission is to advance the law and the legal profession, the rule of law, good governance, human and people's rights, and socio-economic development of the African continent. Now, within this mission, you find that within this mission is the need for PALU to promote best practices around the new normal. I look forward to hearing from us as to what we think PALU needs to do. We have our vision of what we are going to do. We have our program that we have commenced implementation, part of which is what we are doing today and what we did yesterday. But we'll look forward to hearing from participants on what we need to do better. Thank you very much, and I await questions. Thank you, Don.
Thank you very much, Emeka. As you can realize, ladies and gentlemen, that is my boss. He's the person who signs my check. And if I don't organize my words very well, I might be salaryless at the end of the month. So we allowed him to go on a bit longer than we'd have thought, but I think he raises several pertinent issues, some of which I must admit had not occurred to me until he mentioned them, such as the fact that litigants can come later and challenge proceedings that had been taken on virtually if we do not ensure that our legal system, that our written laws provide for it. In a second, I'm going to invite Linda Kasonde, but as I do that, I'm also just very glad to notice that we have in our midst Mr. Ramamuthi Santhanan Krishnan, or Santhan as we like calling him, the immediate former president of the Commonwealth Lawyers Association, who's joining us from India. That's probably thus far one of the farthest participants from us in terms of geographical distance, but obviously the virtual life has brought us together. Thank you very much, Santhan, for joining us. I've also seen Professor Jonathan Claren, who for long was Dean of Law at University of Wits, and a really accomplished academic who has contributed a lot to developments in our continent. Now, Linda, whom I'm about to introduce to you, is a lady of very many firsts. She's currently Vice President for Africa of the Commonwealth Lawyers Association, I think the first woman to do so. She's also the first woman to be elected as president of the Law Association of Zambia. She's a former president of LAS, as we call it. She has also formerly served on the Bar Issues Commission of the International Bar Association and is currently an officer in the Africa Regional Forum of the International Bar Association. She's a lawyer and civil rights activist who, among other things, was the first woman to be partner of a major recognized, international recognized law firm in Zambia. She's the owner or founder of, right now, of a law firm called LCK Chambers, which is a dispute resolution and corporate advisory practice, but which she runs as a social enterprise, as a sustainability measure for her main passion now, which is the Chapter One Foundation. She has established the Chapter One Foundation to promote and protect human rights defenders, constitutionalism, the rule of law, and social justice in Zambia and in Southern Africa through civic education, advocacy, and strategic public litigation. I could go on and on and on, but let me stop there and welcome you, Linda. Can we have a few words from you as we head towards the interactive session of this webinar?
You're on mute.
You're still on mute, Linda.
You're still on mute, please.
Thank you, John, for that very kind introduction. So I'll be speaking to you mainly as a legal practitioner, but also as a leader of a bar association, International Bar Association. That's the Commonwealth Lawyers Association. So in terms of the negatives, you know, COVID-19 has created a recession, a global recession, not just in the legal profession, but in all sectors of the economy. And so legal practitioners are seeing a drop in billing, delayed payments from clients. People are slow to hire new lawyers because they have to be cautious about the economy. We've seen some downsizing, we've seen cutting of salaries. And something that somebody mentioned to me who's a lawyer, which I didn't really think of, was that because people have been working remotely, that's affected how the training of lawyers, young lawyers in firms has been happening. He said to me that he'd come into the office to explain something to a young lawyer, whereas previously they'd been working remotely. And she commented to him that that's something you could never get from a Zoom meeting. And I think this is the new normal that we're facing, that unfortunately it has also created barriers in terms of human interaction. So Emeka mentioned also the challenges around the courts having to place restrictions on movement around the courts and also access to justice in terms of virtual hearings, etc. So I was involved in a case last year in the Constitutional Court, and the court had rules that we couldn't call one of our witnesses via a video conferencing because there were no video conferencing rules. Fast forward to this year, just a few weeks ago, the judiciary issued a practice direction saying that the courts could hear matters virtually, but there's still no video conferencing rules around how virtual hearings should take place. So I thought that was very curious. In terms of Emeka's point about people litigating in terms of their access to the courts and whether or not the restrictions placed are constitutional, I see those challenges being raised here. For example, journalists are not allowed into the courts, or even some family members of litigants. This happened to me very recently, where I've been to court with a client and their family members have been restricted from entering, and of course journalists are also restricted from entering. So these are the challenges we face. And then of course, as mentioned by Emeka as well, doing things virtually comes with a cost. You have data charges. Who's going to bear that for the judiciary? Can they afford to carry out these things virtually? Can all clients afford virtual hearings as well. So these are real access to justice problems that are faced. And then also in terms of the Commonwealth Lawyers Association, we too have had to go virtual to reach our members via webinars, etc. And this is an example of the sort of thing that we do. And also we're planning our biennial conference in 2021 in the Bahamas, and we're grappling with whether or not we'll be able to hold a physical meeting or not. So this is indeed the new normal. We're here. But I hesitate to say the new normal because I live in Southern Africa, and we are seeing a spike in the numbers of cases as well as deaths brought on by COVID-19. So there may still be room for further lockdowns, etc., going forward. So, and that's the thing about this whole pandemic. There's a lot of uncertainty. But in terms of positives, as they say, as a Chinese character says, there's always opportunity in crisis. And there are some areas of practice that are doing quite well out of this pandemic. For example, litigation, insolvency practice, business restructuring, redundancies, and even intellectual property law. I have a South African friend who works at a very large IP firm, and they're doing a lot of work because innovation has arisen out of this crisis as people grapple with ways to get around the challenges they're facing as a result of the pandemic. And still speaking about opportunities, despite the caution that people are exercising in the economy, in Zambia, we've seen some major shifts in terms of people moving from law firms, etc., and setting up their practices at this very uncertain time, which is good to see that people are still positive about the future. Regarding best practices during the COVID pandemic, I think we're still, as I mentioned, a way off from real normalcy. But best practices are definitely to use technology as far as possible to minimize contact between people. That goes for clients as well as fellow lawyers. And one of the challenges that lawyers are facing in working from home, for example, is that the boundaries between work life and home life are being disturbed. I remember speaking to a lawyer who mentioned that clients are now calling him or arranging to have video conferences at 7 p.m. running on to 9 p.m. because they assume because you're at home, you can do it. So this is causing a real problem in terms of work-life balance for a lot of lawyers. And some lawyers have even commented that's led to an increase in billing, which we don't know whether that's been as a result of people trying to appear relevant in very uncertain times, trying to hang on to their job, or as a result of the fact that they're working more because they're working from home. In terms of the risks of this whole COVID crisis, I think the biggest risk is the uncertainty itself. People don't know how to plan for the future because everything is up in the air. And there's nowhere to run to because everywhere in the world is affected by this crisis. So people have to exercise prudence as they step forward. As I mentioned, it's not all doom and gloom. As I mentioned, some areas are doing quite well. But the main skills I think that people who are thriving in this environment are sort of litigation skills, insolvency skills, IP, and even marketing, because now you need to be creative in terms of how you reach out to your clients. Thankfully, there's been some relief, certainly in Zambia, in terms of lawyers as employers. For example, in Zambia, we've seen the suspension of the employment code, which has made it easier to hire and fire and reduce on hours, etc. And we've also seen the tax authorities waive penalties on taxes as well. And then, of course, there's also the real risk that someone you work with or someone you're close to actually gets COVID-19. How do you deal with that? So I think the most prudent thing to do is to, ensure that everybody's safe. So make sure that everybody goes home, gets tested, and just check up on your people, because ultimately this is also a human crisis. People's lives are affected, people's health, and we need to make sure not only your employees are safe, but that their morale is kept up during this crisis. And that's another thing that maybe we need to talk about, the mental health of legal practitioners as a result of this crisis. Because of the uncertain times, because of the economic hardships, people are very stressed. And the more you can do as an employer to ease that stress, the better. So those are just my thoughts on life in the new normal.
Thank you very much, Linda. That was nice and succinct. And I think raises a number of issues, including one that is not talked about enough. We as counselors of people, legal counselors, of course, also end up being, emotional counselors to our clients and to their families and so on. And we sometimes forget about ourselves. So it's very good that you've raised the issue of the tolls that it can take on our own mental health. And I know that Rachel, who among other things, President Rachel Mendy, who among other things volunteers on national bodies in the Gambia that deal with mental health, might also chime in on that. But before that, let me invite Dr. Walid Hegazi, who is joining us from Cairo, Egypt. Walid is a proficient practitioner with over 25 years experience in representing and advising clients in transactions and in disputes all over the MENA region, Middle East and North Africa. He has worked in his home country, Egypt, but also Libya, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates. His main areas of expertise include Islamic banking and finance, project financing, corporate restructuring, and corporate governance. He has a Doctor of Juridical Science from Harvard and also
Hello? Hello?
Yeah, you can go ahead, please.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay. Hello, everyone, and sorry for this technical difficulty. If anything, it just demonstrates life after COVID-19, what you have to undergo on a regular basis. My name is Walid Higazi. I'm the managing partner of Higazi and Partners in Cairo. It's a pleasure to be with you today. I'm going to quickly give you, use my 10 minutes to give you my feedback from Cairo on what has been the experience amid COVID-19 issues and problems. We have, obviously, we started in Egypt, hearing about the issues, as Emeka said, in mid-February, February 14th. However, the government did not shut down the economy until partially doing so by end of February or mid-March. But that was, we never actually shut down or locked down the economy on a full basis. It was always a partial basis. From a legal perspective, that affected the practice tremendously, as I imagine, and as my colleagues have already mentioned in other countries. But in Egypt, it was no different. We had a complete suspension of court proceedings, which went on from mid-March until end of June. Obviously, foreign embassies were shut down. Air travel was suspended until very recently in the beginning of July. You could imagine what kind of legal service we could provide if we cannot go to the court, if we cannot notarize or issue, if the clients could not issue powers of attorney that could be used in Egypt. All transactions and cases were suspended. We were working from home for a significant period of time because it didn't, not because the government shut down or forced us to stay at home. There were opportunities to go and work from the office, but there was really no need to do that because there was concern about safety from the employees' perspective, of course, and from our perspective, and safety was the first concern for us. So we ended up working significantly from home. There were a lot of cooperation with other law firms outside the region to help them and help their clients cope up with some of the impacts of COVID-19. And because they were not able to travel, and we were not able to travel as well. So that actually increased collaboration amongst law firms and lawyers in the region and beyond. Clients based outside, they were contacting us to see how we could help them, particularly that a lot of their executives and employees could not travel to the region and to the country to attend to their affairs here in Egypt. Many of our clients suffered financial losses that you could imagine. So we were, as a result, had to bear some of those consequences as well. We were not able to push for our bills to be paid. We had to compromise and work with our clients on other ways to get around this problem. The biggest issue for a lot of our multinational clients was how could they reduce their cost of operation in Egypt. And one of the main costs of operation, obviously, was the workforce and salaries. So the Egyptian government did not issue any specific measures as other countries have done in Europe and the US, but particularly, but basically you have to rely on what already exists in the law. We have our labor law is kind of a remnants of a socialist system or economic system. So it always goes for the protection of the employees. So it's very difficult to terminate employees. And there are some theoretical ways of doing that, but in practice, very difficult for economic reasons. But there were a lot of procedures and administrative steps to be taken. And because of the government shutdown, partial shutdown, and the government also closed down certain departments. One of them was the administrative department relating to labor. We were not able to process any of those on behalf of our clients. In order to take action to further protect employees, other parts of the government, such as the Ministry of Tourism, put some pressure on hotel operators to continue to pay salaries and not to terminate their employees by suspending their licenses or even revoking the license if they are found to have put some pressure on employees to be terminated. Our advice regarding all of this was very consistent. We gave advice to our client that they had to pay attention to their contracts, review them, see if some of them have already expired, so to take advantage of the expiration date. If some employees were retiring, so to take advantage of the retiring age, because they could not do anything else other than that, or to give their clients, their employees paid leave in order to avoid crowdness in the workplace, and to negotiate settlement agreements with their employees. The legal profession became more reliant on technology, obviously, as my colleagues have mentioned. We did this in our practice, and our clients have already used this in their communication with their third parties and in business. When we were working from home, we had to ensure that that we were able to access files and documents remotely. So we upgraded parts of our law firm technology to make sure that we are able to do that. We were, the development of a protocol to alert clients about new developments and things that they could take in order to mitigate their losses due to legal violations amid COVID-19. We were issuing regular client updates and alerts regarding this. The Investment Authority in Egypt, which looks over all compliance work for companies in Egypt, allowed OGMs and EGMs and BODs to be held remotely and through technological means and internet-based means in order to facilitate these procedures for companies working in Egypt. That was very useful. Finally, best practices and useful suggestions for law firms. From our perspective, we believe it's our responsibility to keep the client apprised of all circumstances that could affect the legal position and progress regarding their cases in Egypt. We regularly send updates on client alert, as I said. We believe that this is now even more important given the restrictions that most of our clients have traveling to Egypt and moving around the world. During the height of the pandemic, we temporarily shortened our firm's working hours in favor to make sure the safety of our people and our lawyers always come first before anything else. Our firm was always looking after making sure that the workplace is sanitized regularly and that we're all wearing masks. I'm not wearing one because I'm talking to you, but everyone else is wearing a mask while being at the office. I leave it at this, and I welcome our participants to participate in the questions and answers session, and I look forward to interact with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Walid. I guess Don is caught up with network issues. Thank you for your presentation from the perspective of your experience. And do you want to shut down your slides, Walid?
Sure. 1 second.
Thank you very much. May I now invite Linda to please make your presentation. Unfortunately, I do not have your profile. I know that Linda was the president of the Law Society of Zambia. She's here to share her thoughts on the effects of COVID-19 on the legal profession in Africa. Linda, please.
Hi, I've already gone. I think it's Miss Mendy who's next.
Thank you.
Oh, Mendy.
Can you hear me?
Yes, please.
I've been having a little bit of problem, but I hope I won't be locked out again. My statement would be on the experience that we have had in the Gambia. And I know as a matter of fact that the Gambia Bar Association has been more concerned with the measures that have been put in place to protect individuals who appear before the court as well as lawyers. The legal profession by its very nature entails essentially dealing with clients on a personal and face-to-face basis, whether in chambers or in court. It is only on rare occasions that legal matters are dealt with technologically. It is also important to note that this is a profession that must function within the ambit of a vital arm of government, whose main task is to ensure that the rights and freedoms of every individual citizen are safeguarded and protected. I have gathered from the statements made by Emeka that has been of paramount. The freedom of the rights of the parties has been an essential issue for lawyers in Nigeria. The same applies here. But in addition, where the bar is more focused on protecting individuals rather than having to follow the traditional ways of appearing before the courts and so on. And for this reason, we consider that all the arms of government must coordinate their respective policies and actions so as to ensure that in the wake of this pandemic, associations and organizations within society and each individual citizen adopt and follow all the prescribed guidelines laid down for the protection of everyone from the negative effects of this pandemic. Until the competent profession, we believe, comes up with concrete solutions in combating COVID-19, humankind, being a social animal, must continue to rely on the palliative actions that are recommended from time to time. Our lives have changed. However, they are not totally hindered. For now, therefore, all that we have to do in the context of our profession, we believe, is to take into consideration the bare need of protecting each other from succumbing to COVID-19. First of all, it is vital that everyone understands that the virus already exists in all societies. And so each one has the responsibility of protecting the life of the other person with whom contact cannot be avoided. That would be a clear demonstration in our minds of respect for the right to life. But this, however, calls for personal discipline, and that's where we've had issues. In our chambers, for example, in addition to having available the required means and measures of keeping ourselves, our staff, and clients safe, it was advisable that the number of visitors in our chambers be controlled in a manner such that we would prepare a schedule of daily appointments for consultation. And this way, the number of persons visiting the chambers may be limited so as to minimize the level of personal interaction. The movement of staff, except where the staff complement is exceptionally large, should not constitute a major problem. Fortunately for us, we do not practice in the form of having firms. We have our small chambers where we probably have 1 or 2 juniors and a limited number of staff. So we do not have large firms in the Gambia. The real challenge is in the way we conduct our cases in court. So when government decided to shut down social activities in the Gambia, the courts also had to suspend all court sittings for a period of about 2 months. But as from now, proceedings in court have resumed under guidelines issued by the Chief Justice by way of practice directions. Emeka has mentioned that they have had to, an issue has been brought in court whether such practice directions are constitutional or not. The Chief Justice in this jurisdiction came under the umbrella of the Constitution, in particular Section 143, where he was allowed to give directives and orders for the proper and efficient functioning of the courts. So he came under that umbrella. And the problem is what is proper, what is
I think we've lost Rachel. Rachel, are you still there? I think we've lost Rachel. While we await Rachel's return, I'm told that Dawn is still trying to join. That's part of the challenges with our IT infrastructure in Africa that we mentioned during our discourse. We are struggling to join the new normal. But there are a few comments which I would like to bring to our attention. Jonathan asked whether PALU or other lawyers association like IBA is issuing or planning to issue guidelines on hearing by video. He said he could imagine that will help the courts. Dawn has tried to answer that by, of course, informing us that PALU contributed to the guidelines that have been adopted by the African Court on People and Human and People's Rights and the East African Court of Justice. And now, my understanding is that PALU and other bar stations can issue advisories, but it depends on the heads of courts to accept or reject these advisories as they are issued. But for ADR, for institutional arbitration, where you subscribe to an institution to be the providers of your arbitration services, you are deemed to have adopted the guidelines issued by the institution, just like at the Institute of Chartered Mediators and Conciliators. We've issued guidelines for remote hearing in mediation. The Chartered Institute of Arbitrators also issued guidelines. So when a process is held under, a dispute resolution process is held under those bodies, you are deemed to have adopted their guidelines. In PALU, we have the Arbitration Committee or ADR Committee of PALU. Presently, I know that they are working on another webinar on how to advise ADR institutes and bodies on remote hearing. Again, we are informed by Caroline that the Law Society of Kenya election was conducted electronically. Now, that is the new normal. Whether we like it or not, we have to continue adapting to this. Rachel, are you back?
I am back, yes, sorry about that.
Continue.
All right, thank you. The question we were concerned with in giving these practice directives was what was proper and efficient under the circumstances. And are these guidelines adequate for the legal profession to function? It goes without saying that closure of the courts for a long period would create a serious backlog of legal cases. And that calls into question the constitutional right to fair hearing within a reasonable time. Thus, to avoid such a situation, procedures requiring the use of available technological facilities were proposed under these guidelines. Also, the movement of people within the courts and precincts was somewhat regulated so that all regulations and measures may be observed. I say somewhat because there has been no supervision of the very guidelines and measures put in place to ensure its strict adherence at all times. Noticeable in all this is the usual human traffic in and out of the courthouse without any control. This is where the leadership within our judiciary has failed us. Essentially, only those who are entitled to be present in the courthouse on any particular day, such as court officials for the purpose of hearing or legal transactions, must be there in the event such could not be transacted by some other means. Inquiries must be encouraged and were encouraged via telephone and email. The possibility of initiating court hearings through virtual and remote means were also explored, particularly in respect of interlocutory applications, taking of dates, adoption of briefs, and delivery of rulings and judgments, with priority being given to matters of high emergency. Filing and service of documents and notices through technological means such as WhatsApp, mobile phone, and email was also being utilized in spite of the rules of the courts, and so on. Proof of service of services, of processes were suggested to be established by filing an affidavit displaying a printout from the electronic device used to effect such service. As regard remote hearings, the courts were given the liberty to give directives to the parties during the trial on the use of video and audio links, where court proceedings would be recorded. But counsels and or parties were not allowed to record except with the leave of the court. As this concern was raised also by the Bar Association, in the sense that how would the courts determine whether proceedings were being recorded or not? But anyway, we were told that we could obtain certified true copies of the proceedings upon request. A special dress code was also recommended, and what we have seen happen, judges are insisting that we are fully robed during virtual hearings. In regard to from the look of things, it is likely that COVID-19 will be with us for a while. Therefore, the traditional legal processes and procedures would have to be adjusted appropriately, especially at the personal level. In dealing with the corporate bodies, similarly, some adjustment may have to be made in the way legal services may be provided. In general, the existence of COVID-19 in our communities has definitely brought about changes in how clients and parties are handled by their lawyers and courts. There are, however, immediate challenges in the dependency on technology and in matters of public hearings. These are presently the aspects which are demanding of a lot of resources. In the use of technology, we must appreciate that we live in a continent where poverty is rife and technology is inadequate. Not every party who seeks the face of justice can afford the use of the internet, or even be able to make use of the technology to enable him or her participate in court proceedings. And even where such facility is available to a party, the quality of the network may hamper its use. This may therefore require reverting back to the traditional way of court hearings. And this is where the bar has expressed concerns in putting adequate measures in place to protect the lives of clients, court officials, and lawyers. Consequently, we have suggested that the court houses have to be reorganized, for instances, for social distancing to be facilitated. Likewise, courts must be regularly sanitized to ensure the prevention or destruction of any virus that may be lurking around. And this would include limiting the attendance of court sittings to only lawyers and or parties involved in the relevant cases, as well as the requisite court officials at any given time, coupled with the mandatory requirement of wearing a face mask. To this end, the number of cases to be heard daily must be limited and spaced out to allow for sanitization of the courtroom. Fortnightly testing of court officials under such circumstances would also be necessary. Having said this, the economic recession has not spared the legal profession. The income of individuals who require the services of the legal profession is not sufficient to cover legal fees. As such, it has become necessary to encourage the settlement of disputes outside the courtroom, which is less expensive in terms of not only reducing expenditure, but also to avoid the risk of contracting or spreading the virus through social contact within a court environment. Thus, the most important legal skills required at this moment are the possession of mediation skills, as well as technology skills to enable engagement in virtual meetings with clients. A reliance on technology, however, has its negative effects on the legal profession. There is the risk of cyber crimes, which may result in the inability of the legal profession to ensure lawyer-client confidentiality at all times, having regard to the possibility of hacking communication between a lawyer and his client via telephone, email, or virtual conferences. Thus, although technology may seem the only possible way of the legal profession handling its clientele in the midst of COVID-19, its use is not foolproof. During this unprecedented period, the most vulnerable industry in the Gambia has been the entertainment industry and the hotel industry, as well as businesses operating within the hotel environment and airports. Hotels, restaurants, and nightclubs have had to lay off their staff, and those fortunate to remain have had to accept at least half of.
Rachel, do you want to wind up in 1 minute?
Yes, in 1 minute.
Our questions and answers.
In 1 minute. And those fortunate to remain have had to accept at least half of their contracted salaries by reason of force majeure. Such actions forced to be taken by such businesses, however, have had to take into account the labor laws. And this is where the skills of the legal profession are needed the most to avoid litigation at its cost. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rachel. Again, let me, on behalf of the participants, convey gratitude to the panelists. I'm having to moderate this, like I said earlier, because Dawn has been yanked off from the network.
Yeah, although I'm back now, President.
You're welcome back.
Okay, thank you very much, President. Usually acting flows the other way around. The junior person acts in place of the senior person when they're not there. So I'm sorry you had to step in to rescue me and rescue us. But that is as it is. And as you all pointed out, it shows just the challenges that we'll face with technology as we try to move into this new world. So I missed part of what Walid said and most of what President Rachel Mendy has said. So I won't even go there. I'd like us to open this thing now to more interaction. So I'll be requesting participants who may want to take the floor to raise your hands. Then I and my team will be trying to look very keenly to get that. Still, the chat function is still on, and I see a few people have been using it. You're welcome to continue doing that. The question and answer function is also on, and maybe if you direct questions to specific panelists, they'll be able to see properly and know when to respond. So if there's anybody that would like to take the floor to make a comment, ask a question, give an experience, you're welcome to do so now. I'm gonna ask Trish maybe to help me, because I can't see any hands raised nicely on my phone, to help me identify should anybody take the floor. If anybody hasn't yet, then maybe we can just go back to the panelists and engage in a bit of a dialogue. If any of you wants to take the floor to respond to something that any of the other panelists have said. Maybe we start with you, Mr. President. Is there anything that you'd like to engage any of the other panelists on?
Now, Don, we have a few pre-registered questions from our participants, which I may ask that we can go and start from there. We have questions from Kinsley Onwuka from Nigeria. We have from NK Ebulus and Muhammadu Mukhtar. Kinsley asks, COVID-19 pandemic has thrown the world into disarray and utter helplessness. How can African lawyers of older generation cope with the new abnormality in terms of adjusting to the new normal of internet technology as current imperatives of our law practice, as e-hearing and e-filing are clearly taking the center stage of our noble profession? I don't know whether any panelists want to address this. Bulus asks, how will the African lawyer fit in the new normal caused by COVID-19, considering virtual and technological development of Africa? And Muhammad Mukhtar asks, Please, I'd like to know how a lawyer can defend his clients internationally with closed borders. Now, I think we've spoken mostly to most of these issues. I'll take it from the perspective of what PALU is doing or will be doing to support the profession in Africa. Like I said earlier, and I will also want Don to make some comments on this when I'm done. Like I said earlier, this is a new normal. We must accept that for a long time to come, it may also be difficult to go back to our old ways of practice. So as the spokes or the voice of the legal profession in Africa, PALU is poised to support the profession and administration of justice to fit into the new normal. What we have done with the guidelines that Don has reported before was adopted by the African Court is to support the court with our advisory on how the guidelines for remote hearings can be adopted. Now we are extending that by communicating to heads of courts in Africa that this can be done. We're also willing to support the legislature where they want to amend the law to support remote hearings. And again, we're looking for resources to engage the courts in Africa, particularly the personnel, the staff of the courts, to train the staff of the courts on capacity for remote hearing. What we have today, speaking from my jurisdiction, is that the staff are not ready for remote hearings. And most times, we had a session in Abuja where for 50% of the time allotted for the case, we could hear counsel and judges asking whether you could hear me, can you hear me, can you hear me? Mm-hmm. That was what happened for 50% of the duration of this particular case. So we find that we are intellectually, infrastructurally challenged, and we're also challenged by personnel or workforce. So PALU will be seeking for funding to support the training of court personnel that will be handling this e-training. On our part, we clearly understand the imperatives for a sustainable practice of law in Africa and our duty to our members and the legal profession in Africa. The African lawyer has to fit into the new normal caused by COVID-19. Virtual court sitting and virtual dispute resolution proceedings have become imperative. So we have no choice but to support our members and the continent to key in seamlessly into this new normal. Of course, there will be challenges. There are challenges because PALU is limited by funding. We are limited by scope. What we can only do as much as we can, limited by the staff we have available in the secretariat. Very passionate staff working to serve the continent. But we would like to hear from our members and participants. What do we think? And that's why we want this to be as interactive as possible. How do we think we can make this work? How do we think remotely we can support the bar in Somalia? How can we remotely support the bar in Nigeria, the bar in South Africa, and all the parts of the continent? Thank you, and I would like to hear views from other panelists and participants.
Can I come in? I mean,
yes, you can. Go right in.
I believe that we cannot, in dealing with the new normal, we have to combine the old normal and the new normal. For instance, in the Gambia, not every party is represented by a lawyer. And there are some parties who are very poor and do not have access to the internet, they do not have access to technology. So they must be provided for. So I think we need to ensure that they have access to justice as well. So the virtual hearing can only, in my mind, can only be limited to those cases in which lawyers are involved. That's my take on it. We also have a problem with the old lawyers. Somebody mentioned how do they fit in. I know that the old lawyers we have here are so adamant not to touch the computer that they themselves have not been able to engage themselves in the virtual hearing. Fortunately for some of them, they have young lawyers within their chambers who have assisted them. But maybe if you think about it, there's an advantage in that it would encourage them now to take in more juniors than they used to before. But the bottom line is we cannot do away with the traditional way of doing things. We may limit it and put certain measures in place, but we cannot do away with it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rachel. I think that's a good point you've made around partnerships that we are going to have as a profession, and I believe the other professionals as well. We're going to have to be much more innovative in how we work and interact with others. Employing where we can younger professional colleagues within our practices, but even if not, forming joint ventures, if you may call it that, to get certain work done. I think it chimes in very well with the question sent by Mohamed Dumokta, who was asking, how does he get to represent his clients internationally with closed borders? So we really have to know who are the colleagues in sister countries or across the world whom we can instruct to work with us in partnership to sort out issues for clients of ours who are across borders. On the part of PALU, we are actually really working now on completely upgrading and digitizing our membership engagement system so that members can join very easily, can choose committees that they want to do very easily, can choose working groups, ad hoc task forces, and so on. And as we go forward, so that when you're looking for a colleague in a different country that you'd like to work with, we become a strong resource where you can go and look at somebody's track record within PALU. Then you get assured that this is the kind of person that I want to work with. So we'll be launching that shortly. But also with regard to the question that President Emeka raised, how do we help advise courts and our legal systems, especially across borders? So part of what PALU has begun doing is seeking advisory opinions from the African Court on Human and People's Rights. It is the one court that has the most subscription on the continent at the moment. Of the 55 African countries, 30 have ratified the protocol establishing the court and are therefore parties to the court. We're encouraging the others to do the same. And the court can issue advisory opinions on questions of law. Now, this is a non-contentious way of getting, a decision that we can implement. So going forward on some of these questions to do with costs, we currently have one that we have just filed, which is on elections in the context of COVID-19. What do we do about the elections that were scheduled for this period? Do we go ahead with them? If we do, what are the kind of guidelines that should be put in place? Do we have national discussions about postponing them? If so, how should these national discussions be held to make sure that the citizens' right to participate in the governance of their country is not sacrificed? We cannot leave the decisions of whether or not to hold elections, when to hold them, how to hold them only to the executive arm of government or only to the political parties. As citizens, we should be in. So that's one that we're doing now. And it looks like there may be other questions of law that would arise later that, again, we may seek guidance that way. Having said that, Walid, Linda, I don't know if you also wanted to jump in at this point.
Yes, I did. I wanted to find out, did I hear you say that you came up with the video conferencing rules for the African Court? Did I hear that?
Yeah, what we said is when we held discussions with the court, both the African Court and the East African Court, and helped contribute to the drafts that they were working with, which have now been adopted and are on use. And because we litigate there quite often, we're among the first people to test the efficacy in working, but we didn't develop it for them.
Okay, well, I think that would be useful to share with other African jurisdictions, such as Zambia, who are now permitting video conferencing, but have no rules to guide how that should take place. So for example, the Commonwealth Lawyers Association is creating a repository of all the COVID pandemic practice directions and legislation that courts are using. And we're collecting them so that it's a resource for other African countries to take precedence from. So maybe perhaps PALU could use that example to roll out those rules to other jurisdictions, just as an example. And then perhaps Don, because you are from Kenya, The example of Kenyan courts giving judgments in criminal matters virtually to criminals who were in prisons, I thought was very inspiring. So there may be innovative ways in which courts can go to the people as opposed to the people coming to them. Using such an example as the Kenyan courts going to prisons, using technology to deliver the judgments at prisons. But of course, this is only applicable to open hearings. But I thought that might be a useful example that could be rolled out in other parts of the continent.
Yes, indeed. And I'll be inviting Walid in a moment. I can see we're about to run out of time. So very soon I'll be asking all panelists, maybe you prepare your last 1-minute remarks to close off. But before giving Walid a chance, yes, I think that's been one of the emerging best practices we've seen. Just put one laptop, you know, with an internet connection inside the prison and let the judge dial in, the judge or magistrate dial in, and let counsel where they are also dial in. And then proceedings are held, in as much as we can. We reduce movements, and at the same time, where possible, reduce prison congestion by getting out on bail, anybody who should be on bail, and also looking at people who had petty offenses or minor offenses where sentence can be shortened and they can be released. But yeah, those are some of the things that we are seeing emerging as best practice. Walid, do you want to come in? Yeah, he doesn't seem to be there. While we wait for him to see if there'll be any requests for the floor from any of our participants, I'm glad to notice to recognize the presence of some of our colleagues on the board. Ms. Fatia Hedhile Messouz, who's the Vice President for Northern Africa at PALU. Mr. Kari Abdul Bagi, who's our Secretary General. Fatia practices from Tunis, Kari from Yaoundé, Cameroon. Mr. Kofi Sive Ato Mensah, our Deputy Secretary General from Lome, and actually was one of the key panelists in the Francophone webinar that we hosted yesterday. I'm also glad to see among the participants, Professor Michelo Hansungule, who's at the Center for Human Rights, Faculty of Law, University of Pretoria. Anybody doing human and people's rights in Southern Africa is almost certainly to have come across him. And a question that I will ask, especially to Rachel, because you mentioned it.
Yes.
You were talking about partnerships, and you're saying where we can employ younger lawyers within our firms.
Yes.
But can you think of ways in which you can also just bring in a lawyer, a colleague, to do a specific assignment one at a time and pay them for that?
That's possible. That's possible as well, but we don't usually do that. We usually use our juniors to handle cases. So it's very rare that we bring in colleagues to do. What we can do is we can refer parties to other colleagues. We do that a lot, but then we do not bring in colleagues who have their own chambers to handle matters. But that is an idea that can be explored, in the sense that instead of bringing them in, we would rather they remain in their offices and do the virtual hearing and handle those matters. But some cases are so complex that the older lawyers would prefer to handle the matters themselves.
Yes, I can imagine that.
Yeah.
Yes, I can imagine that. President Emeka, earlier on when you were running out of time with your remarks in chief, I think you're giving an example or two about what you're doing in the ADR field. Or did you get a chance to expound on that when I was off air?
Well, in the ADR field, in Nigeria, like I said, we have different institutions adopting for institutional arbitration they're adopting their own guidelines for remote hearing. But in Palu, what we have done in Palu is to have our ADR committee, and I like the comment made by Aisha Abdullahi, where she said that Palu should set up, if we don't already have committees like in the IBA. But interestingly, we'll have all these committees. And then what we ask participants and our members to do is to go online, go to the website, and take membership of these committees. Now, for the ADR committee, I'm told we have a webinar coming up sometime this month or early next month. The focus of the webinar is hearing for African dispute resolution. Now, what Dr. Agadai Lachi, who is the chair of the committee, has prepared and sent to me for approval is a remote hearing procedure to support what we already have. We're expected to have participants and panelists from different jurisdictions to discuss their challenges with dispute resolution. Like I said earlier, the major problem is that the parties' agreement to mediate or arbitrate does not have provision for online dispute resolution. The question is, how do arbitrators and counsel to arbitration, how do they navigate the parties from their dispute resolution agreement to online dispute resolution? And that is why I say that we must be solution providers instead of problem identifiers. How do we lead parties from their problem to their solution? Thank you, Don.
Thank you very much. I was just looking through the chat and I see the other comment by Aisha. Thank you very much for that, where you're challenging us as lawyers and lawyers associations. How do we partner better with tech experts, with service providers or regulators? I think that should be a working question for us, indeed, to see how well we can go. I mean, one good practice that I saw, there's an organization in Nairobi, young by slightly younger colleagues, called Lawyers Hub, which brings together law and tech professionals. And recently, they actually even helped establish the Africa Law Tech Association. So one of the innovations they came up with very early during COVID was what they were calling legal hackathons, where groups of lawyers get together, working digitally over a 24, 48, 72-hour period to come up with draft bills. They pick an area in which a law might be needed, then they volunteer and they work together very quickly and come up with a draft bill, which they can then give to the Attorney General for consideration, a way of helping our governments to move quicker at that point when we're looking for comprehensive COVID legislation. We can think more of questions like that. I also see that Dr. Tabeth Masengu has directed a question to Linda. So this comes to you, Linda. Considering the emphasis on commercial litigation and court appearance. Oh, you've seen it, huh?
You can read it out, it's fine.
All right. Considering the emphasis on commercial litigation and court appearance in the Zambian legal profession, do you think that this pandemic provides for a unique opportunity for lawyers to learn and equip themselves with new thematic areas, such as intellectual property law, also older areas such as human rights law, research, environmental law, and so on? So what's your thought on that? And I think after that, seeing as we are already on the hour, we are at the 1.5 hour mark, I'll then ask the participants in the order in which we spoke, I'll call them in to give their 1 minute closing remarks. But Linda, maybe tackle that direct question, which I know applies for many other countries.
In short, I think my response is that necessity is the mother of invention. So what's driving the thriving IP sector in some countries is innovation, because people have seen it necessary to create things to tackle the challenges that have been faced by the COVID pandemic. We've also seen a rise in human rights abuses during the COVID pandemic. So that again will lend itself to having more people address, more lawyers address human rights challenges. So really, areas of practice are driven by the need. And we've seen that the needs have been created by the challenges that COVID-19 has presented.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Linda.
Merci beaucoup, Linda, merci.
Yeah. So maybe now I invite Mr. President Emeka to just come in and give us in 1 minute your closing remarks.
donner sa
Oh, I see.
conclusion en 8 minutes.
Before you do that, Trish tells me there's a
Avant
hand
de
up.
faire
Maybe we
cela,
allow just that one hand up. Trish, please invite the
Patricia me dit
participants
qu'il
whose
y a
hand is
encore une
up to
question.
make their
Il y a une
comment,
question
and then we'll take the
qu'on voudrait poser.
final
Donc, on va écouter
comments
d'abord
of
la
panelists.
question avant d'écouter les dernières conclusions.
For some reason, John is interpreting and we can hear him. He's still not added as an interpreter. Kindly, let's do that so that we don't have the interference, please.
Okay. Thank you, Brian.
Patricia, just make me the host so that I can help you out with that, please. Then I'll put up the hand. I'll allow the person to talk.
Okay, is it done? I see the person who had the hand up was Kereti Usoro. So I think the administrator will, in a minute, just in a few seconds, enable your mic so that we can hear you, Kereti.
Pour qu'on puisse vous entendre.
Okay, so Kereti, you can now speak, please go ahead. Hello, Usoro, please go ahead. They're still on mute for some reason.
Okay, Kereti, can you unmute yourself so we can hear you? Okay, that seems to be a difficulty. If they're able to speak, they can speak later. But let me begin calling in the panelists one by one to give their half-minute closing remarks. And let's start with you, President Emeka.
Thank you, Don. You have reduced the 1 minute to half minute.
Sorry.
But again, in closing, I will invite Africa to think about the effect of COVID-19 on our young lawyers. We're struggling, particularly in Nigeria, we're struggling with young lawyers, unemployment and underemployment. With COVID-19 situation, law firms are no longer employing. There were also law firms that had to terminate employment of young lawyers. We have challenges encouraging law firms to adopt work from home so that young lawyers who can work from home should work from home. Transportation expenses are on the increase because in Abuja, where I practice from, we can no longer share taxis because of the social distancing protocols. So I invite Africa to think about how to support our younger lawyers to cope with the challenges arising from COVID-19. We cannot pretend all is normal. While we are thinking about our clients and administration of justice, we must give some thought to the future of the legal profession in Africa. Young lawyers represent the future of our profession. And as PALU, we are dedicating our efforts in designing programs to support young lawyers, but all the national bars and local bars must take it as a responsibility to support the growth and welfare of young lawyers. Our future is in their hands. And on that note, I say thank you to all who have come in, and I wish us all a good evening.
Thank you very much, President Emeka. Next, I invite Linda Kasonde.
Thank you, Don, and thank you to PALU for this great opportunity. And speaking of opportunities, I think as with any crisis, we must seize the opportunity in the time of crisis. And to do that, we need to innovate, or rather adapt or die. So, for example, myself, I took the initiative because I could see the challenges that were posed by COVID to put together a small team of advisors who came up with a paper to advise government as to the policy changes that could support what they're doing to tackle the pandemic. So there are many ways of providing solutions, not only as a legal practitioner, but also using your legal skills to think outside the box, to provide solutions, not just to your clients, but also to governments as to how they can tackle solutions that these challenges are facing, because they affect all of us and we cannot stand by and do nothing. We are all potential solution providers.
Thank you very much, Linda. Next, I'll invite Walid. Walid, let's have your final word for today. The last time I was told that Walid was speaking, I was the one who couldn't hear him. So is that the situation now, Trish? Because I can't hear Walid and I can't see his visual.
I am able to hear Walid once I click on the English channel. So I think we have to go to the English channel to hear him.
Okay, that's fine. So tell him to just go ahead while I do that.
Walid,
Yes, what?
He's actually on the French channel, not the English channel. Please, Walid,
Wow.
Just try and change your go to off, please, on the interpretation side. Are you on off now? Okay, so guys.
Yes, I can hear you now. I can hear him now.
Okay, he's on the English side, so let's listen from there. I don't know why he's an interpreter, but I don't know. Go ahead, Walid. Okay, I lost him again.
Hello, Don. Hello, Don.
I can't hear anything.
Hello, Don. Can you hear me? Rachel, can you hear me?
I can hear you. I can hear you, Emeka.
yes.
Okay. Rachel, can you go on with your closing statements?
Okay.
Actually, President Emeka, I don't know how come you can't hear him, but Walid was actually speaking. But maybe Walid just wrap up in a few minutes. So just hang on for a second. Walid wraps up, then we go to President Rachel.
Okay, very well.
Thank you, Walid. Walid has said a number of things, President and Rachel. I won't repeat all of them, but he's ended up with a challenge to PALU and said we need to work more robustly with the leaders of bar associations and law societies at the national level and the regional level to come up with guidance and guidelines on how to transform in the context of COVID-19. I now welcome you, Rachel.
Yes, COVID-19 is an invisible client. There is no sphere of human endeavor that has been spared from its disastrous effect. And I agree with Linda that in coming up with ideas on how to manage our practices and take care of our young lawyers, we must work hand in hand with the government, with our various governments. And this is the area in which the government's involvement would be particularly vital, in addition to the enunciation of rational policies and measures geared towards enlightening the entire population about its responsibility of dealing with COVID-19. Without government's input in all this, we would all fail. And so we must, in working towards getting our courts functioning, people's rights protected, we must bring the government on board. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rachel, and thank you very much, the other three panelists, President Emeka, Walid, Linda, and thank you very much to all our participants and the ones who've borne with us till the end. As we wrap up, I just remind you that there's a poll that the team had put up for you. It'll appear on your screens or has appeared. Please take the time to fill it. It's part of continuing the conversation and engaging interactively. I think the challenge that has been brought out to us is that let's keep talking. Let's keep talking, exploring possible solutions, seeing best practices where they come up, mainstreaming them across the continent and across the world, and providing written guidance and where necessary guidelines. So that we will continue to do. From the Secretariat end, we'll prepare a concise synthesis report that captures the major outcomes of yesterday's webinar as well as today's webinar. As I said at the beginning, yesterday's webinar focused more on Francophone Africa and today more on Anglophone Africa, although we ensured that there's simultaneous interpretation for both. Let's look for ways of keeping our lawyers working, especially our young lawyers. The president has given some of the measures that he's putting in place from our partners, PALU, and we'll continue following up on that and continue keeping you informed. Let's also see how to keep our economies working. Because if the larger economies are not working, then even the lawyers who service the economies will not be working. So we are called upon in terms of partnerships to be able to challenge ourselves to partner more with other professions, with the medical profession, with the banking profession, with the sociological professions, which help us understand how society is dealing with these issues. So there's challenges there. The president has told you that most probably the next webinar in our series will be the one convened by our ADR committee. So we just assure you that, yeah, there will be future webinars and we'll be keeping you informed and we'll be inviting you to join. We'll try and learn very hard from whatever may have been the technological challenges today, for which we apologize, to make sure they don't happen. Yesterday, we had similar numbers in the Francophone webinar, and it went without any technical hitch. And also just to tell Walid that in order to be more proactive in reaching bar leaders, President Emeka recently, just last month, established a WhatsApp group for sitting presidents of bar associations and law societies in Africa. So we will improve our membership engagement system, and we'll announce, as I said, we are working on getting a very good technological platform. We are almost done, so we'll be announcing soon. But we're also looking for more informal, quicker ways where people can raise an SOS when there's an issue or share a good idea when it comes. So thank you very much, everybody. Have a lovely day or evening or night, depending on where you are. And we'll hear from you. You'll hear from us again soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Don. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you all. Have a good evening.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Stay safe.
Bye.
Okay. Okay. The poll results will be displaying as we finish talking. Thank you. Bye.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Imagine.